Hi there. In today's lesson, we will be looking at how to do well on the speaking part of the IELTS. The speaking part of the IELTS is divided into 3 sections. Today, we are just going to focus on Section 1. First of all, I will explain what happens in Part 1 of the IELTS. From there, we will look at some things you should do to perform well and some things you shouldn't do, okay? So, let's get started. So, what happens in Part 1 of the IELTS? Well, first of all, the speaking Part 1 of the IELTS is for both those taking the general IELTS exam and the academic IELTS exam. So, whether you are taking the academic or the general IELTS, it's the same test with the same questions, okay? It lasts between 4 to 5 minutes and is made up of 2 parts. First, there's an introduction. The examiner is going to introduce himself or herself, and then you will introduce yourself. For example, "Hi, my name is Jack. Nice to meet you." Okay, so there's an introduction. Then the examiner is going to ask you some questions about yourself. These questions aren't that difficult. Usually they are about where you're from. For example, what city you were born in or where you grew up. They might also be about your work, what you study, your friends, your hobbies, food, sports, or even your family. Family is also a common topic in this part of the IELTS. So usually, after introducing himself or herself, the examiner will talk to you about 2 of these topics. Now, the way they mark this part of the IELTS is by looking specifically at pronunciation. Can they understand what you are saying? Do you pronounce things well? They are also going to be looking at fluency. So, what's fluency? Well, do you go, a lot during the test? Or do you speak clearly, with a nice rhythmic flow? Do you use organizers or transitions like, first of all, secondly, or finally? Do you use phrases like, another reason is? Or do you have problems speaking at a normal, consistent rate? They evaluate all of that under fluency. Next, you are marked on vocabulary. Do you use simple words like good or bad a lot? Those are low-level words. Or do you use higher-level words that really show off your vocabulary? The final component you are marked on is grammar and accuracy. For example, do you only use the present tense throughout the test? Or are you able to correctly use a range of tenses, like the present tense, past tense, present perfect, or future tense? How accurate is your grammar? Now, don't panic. Maybe you are weak in grammar or you make some mistakes, and that's okay. You are marked equally on these 4 components. So now, let's look at some tips on how to do well in Part 1 of the speaking section of the IELTS. So, what are some of the things we should do to get a good mark in Part 1 of the IELTS speaking test? Well, we have a list here of do's. These are the things you want to do. The first thing, which is very important, is how you present yourself when you first meet the examiner. If you are very nervous, don't make eye contact, and look at the floor the whole time. You are not going to do well on the IELTS, even if your English is pretty good. So, it's very important to present yourself with confidence. You want to walk into that test knowing you're going to do well. If you think you are going to do well, you are much more likely to perform better. But if you think you are going to do badly, you are probably going to end up doing badly. So, think positively, stay confident, and believe in yourself. Another important thing is to be friendly. You want to smile. Body language is actually very important in the IELTS. You want to make eye contact, so don't look at your feet or your hands. Look at the examiner. But remember, you don't have to stare at them. Just look at them naturally when you talk. Another thing a lot of students forget is that they don't act excited when answering questions. So, what do I mean by this? Well, they speak in a monotone. For example, if the examiner asks, "Do you like playing sports?" which is a common question on the IELTS, a student might respond, "I really like playing basketball. Basketball is a good sport." The student says it without any rise or fall in their voice or any excitement, making it sound robotic or uninterested. To improve, the student should use variations in tone and emphasis to convey interest and enthusiasm. If the examiner hears that, you are probably not going to get a good mark. You should sound excited about what you're saying. For example, "Yes, I love sports. Basketball is my favorite. I love watching basketball. It's a lot of fun to play." If you seem excited, you will do better. The next thing that's very important is the vocabulary you use. So remember, you're getting marked on 4 different things, and one of these is vocabulary. So how do you improve your vocabulary mark? Well, don't use simple, easy, boring, low-level words like, I like basketball because it's good. I don't like soccer because it's bad. These words, bad, good, they're too easy. You need to try to find vocabulary that is higher level and practice before you do the IELTS. For example, a good thing to do is look at the list of topics you will probably be asked about. Food is a very common topic, so try to come up with vocabulary in advance and practice this vocabulary related to the different topics. For instance, I know they may ask me a question about food, so I might learn some words related to food. Maybe I don't know the word cuisine. Well, if they ask me a question about food, I can say, my favorite type of food? I love Indian cuisine. And there you go. They've just noticed you used a higher level word. The same goes for friends. A common word we use when we talk about friends is acquaintances. This is another great word to use. So again, try to come up with vocabulary for each of the different topics in practice. Now, in this part of the IELTS, the examiner may ask you about what you like. For example, do you like to play sports? What hobbies do you like? What are your favorite foods? One thing a lot of students do is overuse the phrase, I like. They say, I like this, I like that, I like this, I like that. This is not going to help you with your vocabulary mark. So instead of using I like repeatedly, try something different. For example, I enjoy playing basketball. I enjoy hanging out with my friends. I really love yoga. I really love bowling. I prefer playing sports to doing other activities. Using expressions like I enjoy, I really love, and I prefer will add variety to your vocabulary. I'm sure you can come up with more examples, but it's a good idea to practice these types of expressions before you take the IELTS. Another key tip: expand your answers. So what does this mean? Well, maybe the examiner asks you a question like, what is your favorite food? Or, sorry, let me think of a good example. Do you like to play sports? The examiner might ask you that. Some students might just say no, and that's their answer. Do you like to play sports? Do you like to cook? No. Well, the examiner is not going to be able to judge your English if you answer questions with just yes or no. You have to give bigger, longer answers. So this is what I mean by expanding. Don't just say yes or no. Even if you don't know what to say, make something up. For example, a common question they ask is, where are you from? Now, I could just say, I'm from Toronto or just Toronto. This isn't going to help my IELTS mark. It's better if I expand my answer. I'm from Toronto. It's actually the biggest city in Canada. It's also considered one of the most multicultural cities in the world. I don't have to talk too long about Toronto. I don't want to say the whole history of Toronto. I don't want to keep talking and talking and talking. But I don't want a very short answer either. So you need to find an answer that is not too short and not too long. You want something in the middle. So that's what I mean by expand. One way to expand your answers is by giving examples. So I asked this question earlier. What's your favorite food? Oh, I love Indian cuisine. How can I add to this? I can give examples. My favorite dish is palak paneer. It's made from spinach, a type of cheese they use in India, and spices. You know, we often eat it at my house. So there. Instead of just saying, I like Indian food, I've given a lot of examples, and that's what you want to do. Finally, most importantly, practice. So you know the types of questions you are going to get. A lot about what you do for work, what you study, how many people are in your family, these types of questions. Now, it's important to practice your answers. Practice with your friends. Practice with a mirror. Practice, practice, practice. It's very important that you practice answering these types of questions before you do the IELTS. So now let's look at some of the don'ts and wants, some things you shouldn't do in the IELTS. So what are the things you shouldn't do? Now we're going to look at a list of what you shouldn't do, so don't do this. Don't speak with a monotone. I already mentioned this. Don't speak with a flat voice. Speak with enthusiasm, not monotone. Don't give yes/no answers. Do you have a family? Yes, That's a horrible answer. It's more like, have you traveled to China? No, these types of answers are not the ones you want to give. Expand. Make your answer longer, even if you have to lie. It's okay to lie on the IELTS, as long as you speak. That's the most important thing. Do not repeat the question. So if they say, do you like sports? And you respond, yes, I like sports, you are wasting a sentence. Instead of repeating the question back to them, find a better way to say it. For example, do you like sports? Yes, there are many sports that I find very fun and interesting. So don't repeat the question. Do you have a family? Yes, I have a family. It's not a good thing to do. Don't go off topic. So sometimes students, they are really excited and they want to talk. They want to show off their language skills. And so they think, oh yes, I need to expand my answers. But instead of expanding, they go and talk about so many different things that don't have to do with the topic. For example, if they ask me a question about my hometown and I start talking about Toronto, then I start talking about education, and then I start talking about technology. This is going off on too many different topics. Stick to what they ask you. You can give examples, but they should refer to the question they asked you. Don't answer, I don't know. So in the first part of the IELTS, this would actually be difficult. I can't imagine you actually using this answer, because the point of part 1 of the IELTS is to make you feel comfortable. The examiner asks you questions about yourself, so you should know these answers. What are your favorite hobbies? What types of foods do you like to eat? How many members are there in your family? You shouldn't answer, I don't know, to any of these questions. They are about you. And if, maybe you don't know. Maybe you have never thought about what your favorite food is. Just make it up. Even if you hate sushi, even if you hate West Indian food or Canadian food, that's okay. Just make it up. I love West Indian food. I love Canadian food. If you don't know, make up your answer. Don't speak too quickly and don't speak too slowly. So this is a little bit about fluency. What often happens with students is, when they get nervous, they start to talk really fast and they go a mile a minute. They just go so fast. So if you are the type of person who does this, practice speaking in environments where you get nervous. This way you can practice ways to deal with stress and nervousness. Try not to speak too quickly. Also, don't speak very slowly. I have had some students who use a lot of uhs and ahs, and this is a problem. So don't speak too slowly. Another thing, don't speak quietly. A lot of students, they are nervous and shy, and the examiner has to really listen. They can't hear what you're saying, and so you are not going to do as well if you talk quietly. Talk with confidence. Talk loudly so they can hear what you are saying. Finally, the most important point, don't worry about being perfect. You do not have to speak perfect English to do well on the IELTS. Even if you are looking for the mark of 9, you do not need perfect English. You can make mistakes. So if you make a mistake, that's okay. If you can correct it easily, do so. If you try to correct it and you are going to make more mistakes, or you are going to take a lot of time, it's okay, just leave it. If you make a mistake, continue to talk. Move on. There's a chance that the examiner didn't even hear that mistake, and they expect you to make mistakes. So if you make a mistake between using a or the, if you make a mistake in terms of grammar, it's okay. Native speakers make mistakes too. People are used to hearing native speakers. ESL students make mistakes. So you do not have to be perfect. I can't say that enough. Don't worry about being perfect. So until next time, take care.